Welcome to Programming User Interface. In this lecture, we're going to look at the HTML basic challenge. So this week, we were trying to just do the basic HTML markup for our class projects to get the kind of scaffolding or structure ready for the rest of the site for the CSS and JavaScript stuff. So we are going to focus just this challenge on doing the bare bones HTML markup for the page for either the New York Times site, the IMDb site, or the Museum Cultural Heritage site. So I'm just going to do a couple of things, some basic HTML markup for those for our project, just to kind of give an example of what you do. What I'm going to do is not exactly what you should be doing or what I expect you to be doing, but it's just kind of one of the options, right? Just some basic HTML examples I'm going to go through. So I'm going to do it for the New York Times site. So to get started, I just go to the pui-nyt.glitch.me site and load that. And so, right, this is the kind of production version of it, right? This is the what it looks like to the end user. And so it's very basic right now. This is the home page. There's a book page that has one page per book, and then there's a search page. If you go to /search, and you can search for stuff, right? Okay. So what I want to do is start working on these 3 pages. So I'm going to go and say remix on glitch. All right, so I remixed it for us, and now we have our basic editor here. So just to go through these files, just to review, this readme.md is like a readme markdown file. It just has this markdown text. If you edit it, you can just change the information about the page. This New York Times.db is the database file that has the thousands of books stored in it. This package file, JSON file, is a configuration file for the backend. And then the server file is the JavaScript node file for the backend. So this is actually the code that runs the backend of the server. So we don't really are worried about that for right now. There's this this en file lets you make allows you to store environmental variables. So if you had like a API key or something like that, you could store it in here without anyone being able to see it. Then we have these public folder, which has the JavaScript file that we can use and a CSS file that we can use. Both are blank. And then the thing we're going to work on mostly today is this view directory. And this view directory has a number of pages in it. And remember, we talked about in the lecture, previous lectures, about this EJS templating system and what that means. It's kind of like a way for us to do dynamic stuff in the HTML templating system. But we have a book, index, and search page. And so the index page is the home page. And if you look in here, it has basic stuff, right? And right now there's a feature where it has like a random book for each page load, right? So if you reload the page, it displays a random book. So what we want to do is go through and kind of make the HTML that we want to do for each of these pages and just get it to a point where we're happy and we can start moving on to doing the CSS or layout of the site. So let's just start with the home page. Let's say I want to have a home page with a header and some links to the nav bar and stuff like that. So first off, let's change the homepage header to say New York Times bestseller DB. Okay. And then we could also say, let's add a navigation links, right? Right now we just have like 2 basic pages that you might want to navigate to, right? You might want to navigate to a search page, and then you might want to navigate back home. So we'll make a header, a nav HTML element, and we'll put a list in there, and we'll have two list items in there. One will be a link to the search page, right? And then before that, we'll just have a link to the home page, right? We'll just call it home. And so this is interesting to look at. And so when we're doing our linking, right, our links to various pieces of the page or different pages, you can either have absolute links or relative links in HTML, right? And so in this case, we know if you go to /search on this system, the backend will send you the search template, right? And we know if you go to the home page, it's just the index page, and it will send you the index template, which we're working on now. So basically, home is the root of the website. So / right? So that's the basic root of the web page. And so if you want to link home, oh, sorry, you have to have href. If you want to link home, you'd have to have a link to the relative path or the absolute path, right? And so these are relative paths, right? This is always going to go back to the root of the page. And this is always going to go to the root of the page and then /search, right? So if I knew the whole website's name, like for example, if we were using, if it were still using pui.nyt.glitch.me/search, that would be like the full path, right? But since we don't necessarily know, this could change, right? Because it might change for yours. It's good to use relative paths because then we don't need to worry about always repeating the same domain over and over again. So this is a relative path. And so if we open this in a new window, hopefully this goes to the home page. So yes, that's the home page still. And this should go to the search page, right? So you might want to add something more to the header probably, right? And you'll notice here I'm using list elements to hold the links, right? And so that's just giving me a little bit of extra tags that I can do to structure the CSS, right? So I could write a CSS rule, and we haven't talked about this yet, but you could write a CSS rule that says, hey, take all the A links or all the list items in the nav bar and display them horizontally or stack them if we need to, etc. So let's go through the process of adding a header image. Let's replace this with an image just for fun. So I'm just going to make a really basic image just to show how you would include an image file in the Glitch platform. So let's make a new image here in Photoshop. Just make it transparent. Okay, and we'll just very simple. We'll say New York Times bestseller. We'll make that not that color. Let's add some emojis or something. Let's add some book emojis, right? Those are always good. All right. So, pretty terrible, right? Just so everyone knows, right? All right. So there's my logo. So I'm just going to save this out as a PNG. So when I'm back into my glitch here, if I want to add an asset in this setup, you can add it a couple ways, but one way of doing it is going to this Assets tab, and then you can upload an asset. And then you pick which asset you want, and then it appears for you here. And then if you click on it, it will give you the long URL, right? So they're just doing this so that they're using their content delivery network instead of just having it hosted on that one glitch instance. So it's kind of like you can reuse assets across projects if you really wanted to. So if you copy this very long URL and go back to your home page, then you would add your image here, right? So I'm going to change that from being a H1 element, right, to just being a image source. All right, so it's not responsive or anything like that, but we're just going to go with that for now. So the next thing we'd want to do, right, since this is a template, right, it's only appearing on the home page. So if we wanted to reuse this header in the other pages as well, we'd have two options. One would be to just duplicate the HTML in those other templates, or we could actually create a new template and include that template in those templates. That's a little bit more advanced, so we're just going to go for the simple option of just reproducing the code in the other pages, right? So I'm just going to go into the other pages and change the headers to match the homepage header, right? So now if I look at the page again, if I go to the search page, it has my beautiful header again still. All right, so I'm not worried right now about formatting the header. You know, these links probably shouldn't be stacked like this. They should be, you know, more of a nav bar or something like that, but we're going to worry about that when we get to the CSS. We just wanted to do the header stuff. Just have basic HTML stuff. And one other thing I might want to do is have a search bar on the homepage. So I'd want to recreate this. If we look at the site, if there's a search, if you're on the search page, you have this search form, and when you're on the home page, you don't. So you probably want to have a search interface on the home page, right? So what I'm going to do is go over to the search page and just kind of copy the form HTML, right? So this form HTML controls submitting a form to the back end of the server, right? So when you submit a form to the back end, it picks all these form elements that you select, right? So these select options are pieces of data, and then the input option, this input element passes the search value, and it packages this all up in some form data and it posts it to the server. And the server takes that information passed to it from the form, does the processing, and returns back the HTML page, right? So when you search for something like PHI philosophy search, it sends all these options. It sends this field option, this order by option, and then this input option to the backend, and it processes it and then builds this new HTML template and returns this HTML to the server, to the client. So what we can do is we can just reproduce this reproduce this form on the home page, because we might want to have a search bar on the home page, right? But maybe we don't want to have so much extra stuff, extra search stuff, right? So we have like, you're able to select by field, because you might want to search in the title, or you might want to search in the subject or specifically creator field. And then you can even order by which rank you want the results. But maybe for the home page, we just want like a simple one search box, because it's kind of a common user convention just to have a single field search box on the home page. That again, then goes to the search results page. So knowing that, maybe we want to come in here and change our search header from search to advanced search or something like that, right? Because then that gives you the notion that you're doing an advanced search if you go to this new page, right? So what I want to do now is make the HTML on the home page that I could do something with later, but that just has a way to search from the home page, right? So let's come back into the search template and steal that form element and go back to the home page, and let's just paste it in underneath the, we'll put this in the header too, but we'll make it its own area. We're just going to put the whole thing in there and see how it looks, see how it works. So now I'm on the home page. It has the search information. Let's try typing something in and hitting search to see if it works. Right, and it did, right? So I'm on the home page now, but when I hit search, it directs it over to the search page and it has the results displayed. So like I said, I don't really want to have necessarily all this information, right? I don't want to have on the home page at least. These are more kind of like advanced search features, and I just want to have a basic search input box. So let's go, we can simplify things, right? And so now we're still in the HTML area. This is just modifying the HTML elements. And so what we have here is these select menus and the input box, input label are needed for the backend to know what to do, right? So it has to know what type of search you're passing it. So here's the name of the variable being passed called search in, and then the options are all title, subject, creator. And so these are not standard things. This is just how the backend was made. This was how I made the backend to look for these types of values being passed to it and then search the database based on those values. So you would have to know how the backend works and what it's expecting to receive to know what these values should be in the client side, right? So these are all the options available. And then there's also an order by variable that was passed to it, right? And so the label here just displays the label, and then the select and then options are the actual form input. Same thing here for the label is the label, and then the input name is the actual text box that's created. So if I wanted to do just to have a very simple search interface and not have to pass all these options, I still kind of have to pass these options to the backend so it knows what type of search it's going to do, but I don't want to display it, right? And so you could have, you don't want to have the search field displayed, and you don't want to have order by displayed, and maybe not even a button, right? Maybe just you hit enter and it works. So what we could do, right, there's a number of ways to do, there's always multiple ways of doing the same thing in coding and programming. So what we could do is we actually could hide these, right? We could hide these elements. The label is pretty easy to get rid of, right? We could just delete the label and those are just gone, right? But these elements, these search input elements, like these select options, those you can't delete them, right? Because they're needed to be passed to the back end, so that they have to exist for the search to work. So what we could do is, if we wanted to just kind of take the easy way, we could just hide them, right? We could just say, okay, use the style attribute and hide them, for example. Okay, but since we're focusing on HTML this time, let's find an HTML solution to this. So input elements are just basically ways to pass data around, pass data to the backend, right? And there's various types of input elements. So let's look up Mozilla Developer Network for input elements. And so this will list the input types, right? So you can have a button, a checkbox, right? A color selector. These are a little bit more newer ones, more advanced. A date picker, right? Date time, email, field, file field. So you can pop up and ask a file to be picked. Hidden, okay, so that's a good one to think about. Hidden. It says the control that is not displayed, but whose value is submitted to the server, right? So it's still submitting a value to the server, it's just not displayed. There's a month, number, password, radio, checkbox, right? Range, selector, search box, phone number, lots of semantic ones, etc. Right? So right now we're just using the select option, right? The drop down, um, which is different from a input, but it's very similar in that it passes a value. And so if we look at the um, how you define what type of input it is you say, okay, input um, input HTML element, and then you say the type you want it to be, right? And then the ID is for CSS and stuff, and then name is the name passed to the server, the variable name. And then some extra things like required for the various ones, and these are specifically for the text type, right? So you could get rid of these, and it would still work. But so then, if you wanted to say do a checkbox, right? You would say type checkbox, right? And so it's the same element, it's just different, right? Different types do render in the UI differently. So these are all the types we can do. Color, right? But what struck me is this hidden type, right? So you could have a hidden input type that passes the value, but it's just not displayed in the UI, right? So if we think about our form, how it works now, it has um, some inputs here. Also, these are selects, which are very similar to inputs, but they're input values that are displayed. And what we can do is just make these hidden inputs, and so they still pass the default value to the server, but they're hidden from the interface. So we don't lose that ability to pass that to the backend, but then we can just have it not displayed in the UI. So let's go ahead and change these from the select um, these select options to just hidden inputs. So what we can do is we can say, okay, input type equals hidden, and we can say value equals whatever value you want it to be. So let's say we'll make them always pass the all value. So this is the search in one. So which field do we want to search in? We get to pass all, title, subject, or creator, but we'll say pass the all one. And then we'll also have to give it the same name as the existing one, right? So the name is search in, and the value is going to be all. So now that we have an input here, and that's hidden and not the select, we can get rid of the select option, right? So the select input's gone, but we still are passing this variable with this value to the back end. So we just need to duplicate that for the other one. So this is not called search in, it's called order by. And the value is going to be, let's order by title. Now we can get rid of the sort input. So let's make sure this works still. Yeah, and it still works, right? So it's still passing those values, and what we can do is actually let's look at this. Let's go to the search page here. I'm going to open up the developer tools. I'm in the network tab, and I'm going to say preserve log. So when it preserves the log, it doesn't clear the previous page's results, right? Because if you're going from one page to the next, it just clears the previous page's requests and shows you the new page requests. But we kind of want to have a running log here, just to compare them. So if I do the search again, and it's in title, and I'm on the search page, and I hit search, we can go up to the original search request, and we can see through the headers that were sent, or the request that was built from that button push, is that it generated this request, right? And it passed these query parameters to the back end. So it passed search in, order by, and search val, right? So those are these three things passed to the back end via the URL. So we just want to make sure that we're still passing these three things, right? Even if they're not displayed, these three variables, search in and order by and search val. So if we go to make sure, go back to the home page, here's our modified search form. And we'll clear this. If we search again in this homepage one, we can see that it's still passing the same stuff, even though that's not being displayed in the HTML as select options anymore. So it's perfect, right? It works. All right, so if we go back here, we could do some other nice things too. Like, if you hit enter in the field, it just goes anyway. It submits the form, so we don't necessarily need the search button even, right? So let's get rid of the search button. And inputs have some nice things. There's an attribute called placeholder. So something like that you could say. And then if you look at it kind of has this placeholder text displayed. So it's kind of like this grayed out text that is is overwritten so you start typing. But it's kind of like a hint there. So you could even make this super minimalistic, right? And even get rid of the label and just have this search here, something like that, right? You have to think about the best design. But now we have a search field on the home page that we could do something with later with CSS, but it just works, right? It redirects to the advanced search page. So that's great. So the next thing we'd probably want to do is something with this random book stuff, right? So we're pretty much done with the header. And so of course, I made changes to the header. So if I want the same header on every page, I would need to go back and change it on each page, right? And that's the index, and then that's the search page. But I'm probably not going to change on the search page because we already have on the advanced search page, we already have a search input, or a search form. So I don't think I'm going to have that there. But now that there's a home page is the same, and there's an advanced search page, and then there is a book page for each book that has the same header and a search. All right. So back to the home page. Let's make sure this looks right. And so let's kind of break down what's going on here. So here we're starting to see these template variables, right? Some template stuff. And so, no, I'm on the search page. Let's go back to the home page, sorry. So we're starting to see these template stuff, right? So these template things, as I mentioned in the previous lecture, they're just variable holders slotting in data from the database into this HTML template. And then this happens on the back end, and then the back end replaces these placeholders with real data and then sends it over to the client as a real HTML page. So this is kind of like a pre-processing language on the server side it's filling this stuff. So this homepage has a feature where it has a couple or three random books, up to three random books can be displayed. So you can, if you wanted to have that as a feature, have a random book displayed on the homepage, you could have up to three. And you notice there's a limit of three here because title, if you look at the second one, it has the second one is called title 2, and then the third one is called title 3, right? So there's actually three different variables that have different titles in it. If we look at this section here, it's a little bit different. It might be worth looking at, right? And so for these previous pieces of data, these are all basically like strings or numbers. They're just very simple data types. But if you think about a subject, so the subject of the book, there could be many subjects to the book, right? There could be 5 or 6 or more, right? And so you don't want to have a field called subject 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever, because you want to have as many subjects as they are for the book. And so subject in this database is stored as an array. And so an array is a data type that can hold a series of data, a number of pieces of data. And so if you think about that, how is it going to display an array in the HTML? If you just had it like this, it would just kind of maybe concatenate them all together or something, right? And so what we have here is a special templating JavaScript function that takes the subject, and it says for each one of these subjects, pass it to this function and do this with the data. So you can kind of think of this bit here as a loop. It loops many times, however many subjects there are in the array. And so in this case, it passes it to this function called s, or it passes it as s, and then this s is the name of the subject that's available in the iteration, right? So if there's 5 subjects, one's philosophy, one is history, one is language, this will loop 3 times, and for each iteration, S will be philosophy, history, and language, right? So that's why it looks a little bit different, because it's dealing with a different type of data type. It's dealing with a list or an array, not a string or a number. All right, so the other thing we could do maybe for this homepage, let's change the HTML. Probably for the homepage, I'm thinking you probably won't want to have all this data right on the homepage. This is kind of a bit much to display just on the homepage. So we can just have a simple display for each for one random book on the homepage, right? That we can style later, but we just want to get the HTML set up. So we could do something like let's just display the cover of the book and then the title, and then allow someone to click on the title or the cover or the title and get to the book page for it, right? So let's create that up here. So let's have let's do like a div here, right? And we'll have an image, right? That's going to be the book cover, and so that we can use the cover variable to slot in the URL to where the image comes from, right? So there it is. So if we wanted to mess around with this image size, that's probably something better left to CSS. So we're not going to do that with HTML. But we also want to display the title, right? So probably want to have like a span here with the title. Yeah, so we probably want to do something different with the CSS later, but this is very basic for right now, right? The only other thing we probably want, when you click on anything, the image or the title, we want it to go to the book page, so the page about that specific book. And so the way we would do that is we have to add a link in there and make sure that the image and the title are within the a link, right? And then build the URL to get to the book page for it. And so in this system, it's designed so if you go to /book/ and then the book number, it will go to the page about that specific book. And so what we can do is the same way we slotted in the URL for the image for the cover, we can slot in the book number called ISBN. And so what this is doing, right, is building a URL on the back end, and then when it gets to the client, it just looks like regular HTML. So if we look at it, this is now clickable. We'll probably want to have this different later, but if we inspect it, we can see that it's slotted in the book cover, right? But it also slotted in the ISBN number, so it's just a link to that book page, right? So now when you click on this, it just goes to the book page for that book. And here's all the data. So probably, this is interesting information, but for my setup, I just want to have one book page, right? And then I have a footer. Um, I'll leave that there. You might want to put some other information in the footer, etc. And you might want to have like a paragraph here. Welcome to my NYT book bestseller site. Let me tell you about this website. Blah 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 blah. Right? Some copy there. So if we look at the home page again, we have basically what we want, right? Very simple. We have a new header. We have a search ability to search from the home page now, and we have some copy about the site, and then just one random page, one random book, right? So maybe we'll say like, make this a little bit more, make sense a little bit more. We'll say, check out this random NYT bestseller. And of course, the layout and stuff, we're going to handle that with CSS. We just want to, kind of get the information in there for now. Just get the elements in there for now. All right, so what we can do now is the homepage is pretty much done, right, for our purposes. So let's work on the book page, right? And so the book page is the kind of landing page for each book. Every book has its own page. And so if you're going to do this with a static site, you'd make 2,000 book pages. But since we have a template system, we can just populate the template with from the database with information from the book. And so to do this, we probably want to make this a little bit different, right? So this is like the book landing page. And we probably want to make this, let's look at it now. So if we go to the book page, we can see there's our nav, there's our header, and then the nav just has like a bunch of div elements, right, with some data. So that would work fine, but we could modify this a little bit better. So of course, let's redo that. Let's do the same thing we did on the home page. Let's have an image actually displaying the book cover, right? So we want to have that in there somewhere. Let's put that at the top. We can get rid of it down here. Let's look at some of the data that's there. So we have title, ISBN, description, creator, OCLC, which is a book number, rank, so what position it was on the bestseller link, and then for how many weeks it was on the bestseller list. So the rank is like the highest rank it got, and then the weeks is the number of times it was just on the bestseller list. The array of subjects, possible subjects, the publisher, review links, I believe, and then history. So let's look at that in the data. And so there's the numbers. I think there's the position. It reached position 18 on the list. It was on the list for four weeks. Here are the subjects about this book, right? I think this is the publisher. And then this data thing here. And so this data thing is, we're not going to worry about that now, but it's there for our future use. So it's a blob of JSON, which is kind of like a data serialization. And so it's basically JSON representing the rank it achieved and the date that it achieved that rank. So, for each week or for each number of weeks, what rank it was on, and that information. So if you're going to do like a visualization, like a bar chart or something like that, or a line graph or something like that, this JSON data is here for your future use, but we're not going to use it right now. All right, so let's just do something simple with this, right? Because you could do all sorts of stuff with your homepage, with your book page. Um, but let's say like, okay, I think the title should be above the cover and should probably be like a H, 3 or something like that instead of a div. So we can get rid of it here. Um, this will be useful later if when we do search result pages. It's a link basically back to the search result page. So maybe we'll put that in the header for now. Come back to it later. And then we just have a bunch of data, right? So we have like uh, the history thing is that's the JSON stuff. So let's comment that out for now. We're not going to use that for now. And basically, you have a bunch of data fields that are being displayed. So the best, I mean, you could do a number of things, right? You could do um, a list kind of element, like an unordered list or ordered list for this data. There's also this, let's look it up, Mozilla. There is the DT element. Um, and so this is part of a series of elements that are for like the description details or description. Um, they want to call it description list. And so what you can have is a list that kind of looks like this, where you have the header or like the category, and then the data itself, and then the category, and then the data, right? So this might be an okay element to use since we're having kind of like a list of data. You could do a number of different elements, but just as an example, let's do this. Let's use this format. So we're going to have a DL as a parent, and then we're going to have the DT, which is going to be the type of data. So this is going to be called the ISBN, and then we're actually going to put the data there, right? So this might not be the best way of doing it right now, but it's at least better than the div, right? It's a little bit more semantic. So let's look how it looks here. Um, so yeah, so there's the categories, the ISBN, and then here's the data. So let's just do this for the rest of them and see how it looks. So description, you have creator, this one is a little bit tricky, right? Because we have um, a loop kind of thing. So we're going to have one DT that says subjects, but inside of here, it's not going to be a div, it's going to be DD for each one, right? And then publisher and review. All right, get rid of these empty things. And this is hidden. All right, so let's see how it looks. Yeah, it looks a little bit better, right? At least there's like a header. This doesn't seem right. Yeah, this is not right. So let's see what's wrong there. So it should display the subject. Yeah, let's try it again. Yeah, subject. So it looks like, so there's a problem here where there's like, when there's no data there, it's kind of just has an empty field, right? Um, and so what we could do is we could actually test to see if there's a piece of data, and using the template system, only display the HTML elements if the data is there. So what we could do, uh, in this case, we know that the OCLC number doesn't have, it's not there, right? So, because it's not being displayed. Um, so for this, so we could write an if statement using the templating system, and this is kind of a new thing for us. Um, and what we can do is we can write an if statement to see if the piece of data exists, and if it does, display the element, otherwise don't display it. And so here I just looked up an example of using an if statement with our templating system called EJS. And again, there's no way you would know this intrinsically. You'd have to read the documentation. This is kind of like documentation for the EJS templating system. And so it says, okay, you can use these bracket, parenthesis, sign, say if, and then the thing you want to test, and then do something here if that test is true, right? So if we go back to our data, we could try to say, put an if statement here and tab it. And then when you're doing if statements, you always want to close it, right? So here's the close tag. And what we're going to do is we're going to test if the OCLC length is bigger than 0. And if it is, then it should display the data, including the field name and the data. Otherwise, it should just hide it, right? So let's see if this works. Yeah, right, so there's no OCLC number displayed there now. Let's see if one does have the number, it works. Yeah, so there it is displayed. So you'd have to you do this for various fields that might not be there, right? So review seems to be sometimes there, sometimes not. So what we could do is we could do the same thing for review. Some of the pieces of data, like you expect they're always to be there, right? Like title is always going to be there, so I wouldn't put that put one for title. But if you come across pieces of data that potentially couldn't be there sometimes, then you might want to add this little if statement here to make sure that if the data is there, it's displayed. Otherwise, hide it from the template. All right, so I added it for a few more. Oh, okay. So if you do something wrong, you might see something like this, and it is telling you there is an error in something I did in the templating system. So it says unexpected token, open parentheses, while compiling the book EJS. So what you'd have to do is go back in here and figure out what did I do wrong? Or where did I put a unexpected parentheses here? And so, yeah, this is just as we do this more, you'll get used to this. But so I copied, if we looked here, this one worked for the OCLC number. And for some reason, I copied this one and we put it down here. But this is not, this extra parenthesis is not the way you do it. This is not how you close the if statement. That's how you close this loop thing. So I was being lazy and I copied and pasted the wrong thing. So want to make sure that there's no parenthesis ending there for these if statements. So let's take a look if that worked. Yes, so I didn't get an error message. And now the things that are not there are hidden, right? So that's a new thing we learned is how to do templating if statements. All right, so the last thing you'd probably want to work on is the advanced search page. And you probably want to come in here and do something similar, right? You probably want to have a different HTML results. And so what you can see here is that it does something similar to the other iteration thing where there's a loop for each result. Because if you think of how if a result is coming back from the server, there's going to be usually one or more results. And so since it's sending one or more things as a array, it needs to be able to iterate through the array. And so this is basically allowing it to loop through each result. So you don't see, it's not like the home page where there's like title 1, title 2, title 3, title 4, because you could have up to 2,000 results, right? So you don't want to have to hard code a variable for each result number. So this passes the results as a big array, and you can access them in this loop structure. Each one of them appears in this loop structure. So what you probably want to do is go through and maybe do something similar where you're changing these from divs to something more a little bit better for your setup. You at minimum, right, would want to come in here, maybe add something similar to what we had on the home page, which was a way to link to the book, right, and have displays cover, right? So something like that. So when you search, it actually so here it's saying ISBN is not defined because I just copied it from the home page and plopped it in there. But if you look at how ISBN is being displayed here, since you have many results, not just one thing, it's not one variable. So everything's stored in this R variable, this result variable. And as we do this more, we'll talk about this more and it'll become more clear. But so in this case, ISBN is a variable. We're saying, hey, use ISBN variable, and it does not exist. So in this page, when you're referring to the ISBN, you have to call it r.isbn. And if you're calling a title, you have to say r.title. And if you're calling it cover, you have to say r.cover. Right? So if we try that again, so now at least the cover is being displayed for each one, right? And so you probably want to redo, you want to add the HTML elements for the search results to make more sense to your design or to your HTML elements you want to include on your page. Probably use like those DD elements or a list on our list or something like that. You can also add in checks, right, to see if the data is there and display the data or don't display the data, etc. But yeah, so I would spend more time making this a little bit, the display page better, but it's kind of a repeat of the book page. So from this, we should have learned how to do a little bit more with the HTML, right? There's tons of HTML elements to be used. And we can still see that it's very clunky, right? Everything's very, very simple, and very large, right? So what we're doing right now is just making sure the elements of the data are there and in the right HTML element tag before we start moving on to doing things like layout and styling. So if you got your site to this point, it's pretty good, and we'll continue more in the next lectures working on getting layout and more functionality developed for the site. All right, thanks. Bye.